Joining me on stage will be Ron Gura of Empathy, Bobby of Benikiva, Pooja of Tech Mahindra, and Gary from EasySend. Welcome them to the stage. As they're walking up and getting their microphones, raise the roof, we're gonna be talking the easiest yet most difficult conversation, which is transforming your life and health foundations. Exploring the holistic and modern leap in technology stack of the future. Welcome to the stage. So super excited to have this amazing panel here today. And for those who don't know, when a panel is curated and I get to pick the people on it, there's so much intentionality. It's not just like, hey, do you want to be on a panel? It's very intentional with how we want to showcase the capabilities and the framework and the thought leadership. So I couldn't be more ecstatic to have the four of you joining me today. Let's kind of reflect on, we've heard about these macro trends, right? Increased longevity, largest platonic shift that we're gonna ever have in wealth transfer. Post-pandemic, still, we're gonna hear about that in the next session. Post-pandemic awareness, yet uptick in people buying annuities, right? People are like, how are we gonna invest? What are we going to do? Yet a platonic shift in the younger workers, not necessarily valuing traditional protection products the way in which maybe they should be valuing them, and this unparalleled upcoming wealth transfer. Today, I have four experts, and just so you all know, holistic digital customer interaction with Gary Chan with EasySend, architecting your life and annuity way of living for the future, Pooja Kane of Tech Mahindra, Claims Reimagined, Bobby Shmurtsoff, Benikiva, and holistic beneficiary care at a time when it matters most, redefining generational loyalty, Ron Gura, Empathy. So let's delve into these topics if you all don't mind. How you guys are pioneering these things. These are not easy things to solve. It's not like, hey, we're just trying to digitize this. We're trying to make this automated. You all have to weave the very fabric together in a very complex way. At the same time, with very difficult, latent technology stacks. I remember Ron, one of the first conversations he and I had, he's like, hey, Lisa, it's not actually my technology. It's like they don't have what they need to plug in to my technology. And Ron was like, and yeah, I want to sell them. Clearly, Ron's a serial entrepreneur. He'll explain that in a minute. He's like, I want to find a way, but they're missing this thing. And then of course, Ron goes and he builds it. So why don't you all quickly introduce yourself? Bobby, let's start with you. Love seeing all the diversity on this stage as well. Bobby, let's start with you, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm Bobby Shrivastava. I'm a co-founder, COO of Benikiva, and our mission is to really help streamline the claims and servicing operations from claim intake all the way to payout, including the audit features, because claim is not over at the time of payout. There's audit functionality. And my favorite module is how can you take a claim, which is an operations expense, and turn it into a potential revenue driver.
Love that. Ron?
Hey there, Ron Gura, co-founder and CEO at Empathy. Our mission is to help families deal with loss. So that means saving them time and money and stress when the inevitable happens. And we do that primarily by working with life insurance carriers of all sizes.
My name is Gary Chan, VP, Head of North America at EasySend. Our mission is to transform what we've coined as customer data intake across the insurance carrier ecosystem. And so I get very excited about the specifics of what makes these things challenging. I'll be talking a little bit about why data intake, submissions, all of that is still manual today in many areas. And obviously the specifics around the type of organization you're in, we spend all of our time day in, day out thinking and talking about. So excited to share that today.
I guess this works. Hi everyone, my name is Pooja Kane, and I globally head consulting and solutions for our insurance business at Tech Mahindra. We have, with a team of domain experts and transformation consultants and architects and technologists who strive to create value propositions when it comes to a strategy roadmap. How do you get started? What are those plug-and-play technologies that can be integrated? How do I define my data foundation and my data strategy? What's my hyperscaler strategy? How do I draw insights and modernize my core? So all of these are pertinent questions that we try to help address our clients, and I look forward to this conversation with all of you.
My favorite thing is I never spent any time talking to the four of you about any of these trends. No, I love it. I love having, and I love having you all together to talk about this today for the audience. So Pooja, let's lead off like with the big macro. Let's start at the macro. Let's bring everybody in. We're gonna go down and we're gonna click into our detail worlds, but let's start at the macro level. We talked about the aging population, this huge unparalleled pending wealth transfer. How do you think the increasing trend of these aging wealth transfer with this digital divide going on in the younger generations we're heading in?
Sure, Lisa. I think Scott already addressed a few of these points in the previous session, but looking at the number projection, right, in terms of the gap in protection coverage as well as the number of the aging population, it certainly is a call for action now and today, and I think that strategy reset is a great way to go about it. To start with, strategy reset for both business as well as IT. When we say business, I think the industry per se has been very product-centric, and how do we move to become more human-centric would require a lot of the journey study, a lot of study around needs of the various segments of the demographics, age-well needs, whether it's about enabling them to maintain a standard of living, to financial planning, to inheritance planning, to assisted living, and so on, right? So the requirements of this demographic are already calling for the insurance industry to also bring together health and wealth industries. Then comes the beneficiaries, and we are talking about getting them into awareness, right, in terms of being able to connect with them, build their awareness, and then start engaging them. So if this journey is studied before going into the strategy for products and also strategy for the business models, I think that can be a great starting point. There are sophisticated methods today. We know there is a great amount of data science and research that can be applied to study these journeys. The business models can then be informed by these journeys. So pay-as-you-live kind of models where premiums are flexible and behavior-driven. How do you design these? Once these models are sort of established, that's when and in parallel, of course, the CIOs can focus on digitalization of the channels, right, of integration of these channels, as well as laying some of these technology and data foundations. I think if all of this starts in parallel, it will lead to addressing the gap in terms of, for the insurers being able to launch more flexible and affordable products. And there is this whole untapped set of demographic that we are trying to reach to, right, as an industry. So I think these changes will lead to insurers being able to take flexible products to the market, as well as define customer experiences that are and sustainability being a first thought in all of these would probably summarize a picture of strategy that needs to bring together so many of these building blocks.
I listened to you talk, Pooja, and first of all, I'm so glad we have people like you who are so passionate about doing this. You would be like my favorite architect to hire to build this. But what I think is just almost daunting is the fact that you can't just do one thing. And it's not enough. Like a lot of times we say focus, right? Like focus, crawl, walk, run. Yes, and. You got to do that in like 20 different sprint lanes out of the gate. And so I think the important thing here is The people leading today are not people doing one thing at a time. They have to do multiple things at a time because their bet is on society at large. Their bet is not on incrementalism. They may appear to be incrementalizing, and we all know how frustrating that can be, especially if you're a startup, but they're doing multiple things at a time, as Scott articulated. So let's take this down like another level. Let's move into analytics. Let's move into product-centric approaches. And I want to ask, some of my favorite startups on the stage. We've got data and analytics, and we actually heard Magda talk about it earlier. We've always had data and analytics, by the way, and the insurance industry to me was one of the OGs of data and analytics. We eat, sleep, and drink data. But how do we really target it to tailor curated solutions and experiences and product-centric approaches? And I would love to maybe start with you, Bobby, on that, and then connect over to Ron and Gary, and then Pooja, I'd love for you to kind of weigh in on that as how are we gonna pull all that together? So Bobby, let's kick it off with you. I know that's a mouthful, but I know it's something that's actually embedded into the way that you show up and go to business.
So I heard this quote yesterday that was stated, "We are drowning in data, but thirsty for insights." And that is, to me, a summary of what the state of the industry is. We are collecting, there's so much data that's available that can be tapped, but we still are unable to get actionable insights. And I think when you start to build solutions and products with use cases and data-led insights and figuring out how you can leverage data and really find some of these hidden gems in our data analytics, right? What data can tell us about the products, about the use cases. When we start building solutions from a customer point of view and not from a IT point of view and not from a internal assumptions point of view, we're gonna find that when we look at data, right, we can really leverage data for good and really build these solutions and processes that are very customer-centric.
Yeah, I love that. Ron, how are you all thinking about that?
I think the easiest way to
But that was cloud downtime, microphone downtime.
understand the gap in data, just like Bobby is referring to, is the moment of truth. When people call in for their payout, it's a very confusing moment because that's not your customer, that's the beneficiary. They're calling you, giving you all the information they have, giving you data, telling you they need help, and you have data that you're gonna pay them in X amount of days, 99.9%. Here, at the same time, you're doing Super Bowl ads, but your next customer is right there. So just one example. So we all talk about generational loyalty and we talk about data, but outside of the policyholder and actuary, we're not leveraging that at all.
Yeah.
So for us, of course, that translates into beneficiary care and how can we do more beyond the payout.
And I'm just going to use like a personal example here, Ron, because you and I have had this conversation, but when my mom passed away, like let's make it real, right? When my mom passed away, I was like my mom she had divorced my dad and whatever, it doesn't matter. He had a life insurance policy. Fine, it paid out, to your point, transactionally, it was great, paid out. I got to cover all the things, funeral expenses, all the things. But I remember telling you this story, Ron. I remember trying to cancel my mom's cell phone with an unnamed cell phone provider. And they were like, "Do you have the PIN?" I'm like, "I do not have the PIN." "Do you have the PIN? We cannot talk to you unless you have the PIN." I'm like, "My mother is deceased." And first of all, just saying that in that moment of despair is really hard. Bawling, I'm driving down the Florida Turnpike, going to the funeral home.
And I remember you told me you were even pregnant at the time, so not
right.
any...
Yeah, I was high-risk pregnancy.
Things, yeah,
you remember a lot of details. I was like 6 months pregnant, all the things. And I remember just screaming at the phone company. I'm like, okay, first of all, I'm trying to be a CFO. I'm trying to avoid a bad debt. Secondly, I'm just trying to cancel a cell phone for somebody who's deceased. I don't know what it was about that moment, but it just broke me. Like, here I am bawling, an insurance executive. I remember telling you, I threw the phone down. I was like, I'm never talking to you again. Good luck collecting this debt. But the point is, Ron, that had nothing to do with insurance in that moment. Yet it had everything to do with the humanity of taking care of somebody. And by the way, that phone company is dead to me. that insurance company, yeah, they paid me, but it wasn't anything that, I can't even remember the name of the company. I literally can't remember the name of the company, and I'm an insurance exec. So my point there is, how do we make, to your point, how do we actually make things better? And it's transactional for sure, but it's customer centricity. And in that moment, I didn't actually expect my insurance carrier to cancel my mom's cell phone account. But what I wanted was somebody to care. So on to you, Gary, which also comes into the digital customer centricity. How do we take, not to mention the forms I had to fill out, right?
Yeah.
Forms upon forms upon forms.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, Bobby was talking about, we have more data than we know what to do with. And I actually, we have a different perspective. We see, whether it's completing a claim or whatever process, and you go online, right? You're going to find, unfortunately still today in 2023, a process that has a PDF, and they're going to say, hey, look, open up this PDF. The instructions are all there. It's fairly simple, and then you go through it, and it doesn't look simple at all, and it's an emotional time, and then that's where you get the phone call, right? And so that's the world that we see at EasySend, which is on one hand, are there real accessibility considerations around that process? Yes, for sure. Are we thinking about it all the time? No. And then you have the other demographic. You asked the demographic question last time, what about the new demographic? What do they want? What are the channels that they play
Certainly
in?
not a PDF.
Right, exactly. And they're three evolutions ahead of what maybe the current demographic is used to. Maybe it's male in that world, right? And so, thinking about all those considerations, we think about too, and it's not, again, just digitizing, right? It sounds so simple. Make it digital, right? Take this form and put it on your website, and you're done. It's not at all, and I'm going to pause there because I know we have a lot more to talk about.
We're going to go into that. But I think on this, and I talk about it a lot of times as digital is not like a tool you just shove at something. It's like thread that you have to weave together. And to your point, Gary, it's how do you weave this experience together in a way that is at that moment, not just redirecting the policyholder, the beneficiary, because loans on your annuities and all these things, right? But is connecting it in a woven way that's intuitive, right? We think of things more as switch tracks. I jump on one app and onto another. I jump off one and onto another. A human is much more organic and centristic. So let's go into that a little bit, Gary. As we shift towards digital solutions, right? We went 1.0. Let's make everything digital. We've seen a very fragmented app-centric approach. Some of my favorite people call it innovation theater or appism, which leads to consumer frustration. People do not like intellectually insulting technology. I'd rather have no technology than intellectually insulting technology. So how do we as an industry transform through our customer interaction and intake model, not just digital 1.0? How do we reinvent this, and why is it essential to rethink the entire process, not just digitize the as-is process or form?
Yeah, there's a lot in this.
That's a mouthful, right?
Yeah.
Good thing I have notes.
So I'll try to tackle the first part. I think the base case today is a lot of manual data entry across the industry, right? And so what does that look like? It looks like live phone calls, and Q&A and punching that into a backend system, or in other situations it's mail, right? And it's horrible. Step one from there, PDFs, you put those on your website. We all know that story, not great. Let's call it the next evolution, taking those PDFs, turning them to web flows, web applications, whatever you want to call them. They are pretty much forms, just in that new form. And so to me, I think if we're thinking about reinventing this in in a way that people actually want to use. I think about the customer is not just one entity, like the end user, it's everyone involved in the chain. And the chain often, it depends on the use case. And let's use maybe like disability claim submission as one example, right? There's so many entry points. There's the claimant, there's the sponsor, the employer that could initiate. There's all different scenarios of how it starts. And then there's a path of submission of data. A lot of that you should have, but honestly, they'll make you fill it anyway. And then at some point, you'll probably need a physician to say something, right? To make a claim. All these people have to sign, all these people have to make some kind of attestation. It changes hand multiple times, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails back and forth. To Bobby's point before about data, this is unstructured, right? And so how do we shed light on that whole experience with all of the stakeholders involved? I think reinventing that whole experience, that is just one process of hundreds in a carrier organization. And we spent a lot of time just diving into that one. And so, but if we can solve it thoughtfully once, then we can use that as a framework going forward to treat all of them in that same way, right? And for the business, you get structured insights and real-time insights where right now it's kind of just in the wind and happening away from you. So that's just an example of how we're thinking about it.
The other thing I love about that is I think that the problem with digital 1.0 and apps and all these things is not only is it fragmented, but it's thinking about sustainability. It's redundant. We're doing it over and over and over and over again in all the apps and all the interactions because we were just trying to go run as slow as we are. We were trying to get out there. What this says is almost like an enterprise level to it, which of course, Pooja's nodding, I appreciate. It says take the insanity out and orchestrate all of that at an enterprise level. Be intuitive about it because you don't actually know in all those little apps that were built for those little points how many times you don't understand that somebody's getting frustrated because I just did this over here, or I just did this over here. And by the time they get to the claims process, which is not the time in which they should be frustrated, they've already done all this stuff. So I really love that reflection, Gary. And then, Ron, let's layer onto that. We have the often overlooked burden of loss on family and society. How can the claims process be readjusted to create a more supportive beneficiary experience?
I think the first thing you want to do is balance scalable tech with a human touch, and think about all the ways that you can inject compassion into the process. People have so much to do beyond the claim. They have more than a year of work to wind down the affairs of their loved one. And what this family bought from you was peace of mind. Financial peace of mind, yes, you're delivering that with the payout, but also emotional peace of mind and administrative peace of mind that comes on top. So I think if you want to take a product-centric angle, what you want to make sure is that there's continuity of care. There isn't a dead end. Look at every part of your process. If it's a policyholder transaction, if it's communication with a beneficiary, and look for a dead end. For example, we got your claim, we'll be in touch. Or any one of these should have, and we're not going anywhere. Or also, we're here for you with that. And that's also how you eventually lead to generational loyalty, because that beneficiary is actually your next best customer. He is at age, he's giving you all this data, he's telling you he's having a hard time right now.
Right.
So leveraging all that, not just for generational loyalty, but also for asset retention and OpEx reduction, that's how you do it, by not putting those walls, by enabling continuity of care and showing up.
Yeah, in that unexpected way. Because as we all know, customer acquisition cost is the hardest fought battle on the battlefield, right? And so Bobby, let's kind of connect that, because clearly there's a lot of centricity between you and Ron here. How do we, first of all, claims reported to me. We've always embraced claims processing. We've always understood we have to stand and deliver, especially for life and annuity in the moment that matters. We have actually, as an insurance industry, always cared about that. That's like a badge and shield of honor for us, right? But honestly, it's antiquated, outdated manual processes. Like to your point, Bobby, we may be doing it, but it may be like duct taped together, right? So and one of my favorite examples is the MIB reporting and things like that. You know, it's limited at best, and we're looking for causes of death beyond what's on the death certificate itself, so we can see those data, so we can see those trends. How are you seeing carriers advance with claims integration? What are they doing?
So first of all, like for us, you know, like from a carrier perspective, claims is your moment of truth. Like you cannot mess up, right? Like that is the promise. That is the end promise in the, you know, I'm talking about death, you know, on the life side, but that's the promise. So when we, you know, when we started our journey in 2016, it was interesting to see what Gary was talking about, like what digitization is. Oh, my claims are digitized, and when you actually go study, right? I interviewed about over 400 claims examiners when in our journey of building Benekiva. What I found was that is not digital, that's analog. And yes, and what we also found were carriers were taking steps to saying, oh, I've got an FNOL, I've got a great customer experience. But to me, like a great FNOL tool, without integrating with the staff experience, is putting a lipstick on a pig, right? At the end of the day, it's what Ron was talking about, the wall. There's a friction, and when there's a friction, what we are finding with carriers is there's impact, and it's impact not only with the customer service, but there's indirect impact. When we hear that 50% of all calls that come into a contact center are claim status related.
Wow.
That's a friction point that we need to solve. So very happy to see the movement. Like we just had a claims workshop, and I was anticipating 50 people, planned for 64. We had over 200 people show up to build a future of claims. So what that tells me from an industry messaging perspective at ITC is we're becoming serious about claims.
Yeah.
So when we talk about integrations, it's about, there's a lot of talk in the industry about Gen AI, new shiny objects, right? Great objects, but new shiny objects. And if you
Costume idea for tonight, if anybody's still on the lookout.
But if you don't have the proper foundational level systems and can stitch together that integration layer with an empathy, with an easy send, how are you going to really look at test and learn with the Gen AIs of the world,
So
right?
let's bring that one. I think that's super important. Let's bring that one home. Pooja, I'm going to kick this one over to you. And I'm watching the clock because I know we're winding down. It's no secret that we all say life, like not only is life like sometimes the forgotten stepchild, but definitely theoretically has lagged behind its PNC brethren in terms of tech investment, deemed a little bit more antiquated. What do you all see? Pooja, I'd love your answer on this. How do we stitch it all together, and how do we move the life and annuity carriers forward? Because, you know, they're not necessarily on some standard industry monolithic platform. They're on a lot of homegrown, right?
Absolutely.
You all know this. You interact with them.
Absolutely, yeah, right, Lisa. I think I come back to the foundations, and as Bobby was just referring to, that CIOs and the CIO function would play a very important role in laying this foundation, whether it's the hyperscaler strategy, or how do I enable my infrastructure to be able to plug and play. To be able to deploy innovation at speed, or to consume different services in a pay-as-you-go model, right? Yeah. So the integration, the cloud foundation, and then the movement of data. Do I access data at rest? Do I virtualize my data? Do I move all my data into a mesh architecture? So some of these foundational capabilities and decisions will decide in the long run the ability for insurers to transform, to bring in new solutions, and to stitch together these solutions, right? And the core modernization, I think, as I was landing yesterday, I got an aerial view, right? And I was thinking enterprise strategy and planning is often related to city planning and how your water moves and electricity moves. And are we really expecting, if we say dynamic and intelligent workflows, are we expecting those connected systems to change on the fly? I think it's a difficult and a tall ask. So taking the closer analogy, as I was talking to one of my colleagues, the building blocks, right? So how do we identify those foundational building blocks, but also, the original analogy was that you identify the right blocks and then you should be able to bring them together, dismantle them, create them again, or create whatever you like. But I think with Gen AI, and all of these changing equations, I think we are also talking about how do you reshape those building blocks.
Yeah.
And that readiness.
I think of the word shapeshifter.
Yes. Oh, shapeshifter. Yeah.
Right.
Why not?
And I think that not to,
Yeah.
I want to,
So
we're like right on time.
That exactly defines,
What I want to leave the audience with is the shapeshifters sitting on the stage are what you need in order to build the technology of the future. The important thing is you can't just do it with one. You've got to think about the fluid. And the fluid is if you just do one, you'll improve a thing. You have to do all things, and of course we're missing admin, but that's, it's like an engine. No, I'm joking. But you've got to do all things, and that's everything has to be lined up, everything has to be in the gate, as Pooja set us up. So thank you all to the panelists, Bobby, Ron, Gary, Pooja. Such an engaging discussion. I'm sure they'll be around for the rest of the conference at ITC. Thank you all for joining us today.